I'd like to welcome everyone who's joining us for our eLab Accelerator webinar. This is one of many eLab webinars that we like to host to let our network and other interested industry professionals know about the great things that we have going on in RMI's Electricity Innovation Lab. So we thank you for joining us today, and with that, we'll go ahead and get started. So a couple of quick housekeeping items before we get into eLab and eLab Accelerator. Right now, we are keeping all participants on mute in order to maintain sound quality for the presentation. If you have a question during the presentation, please go ahead and send it to us via the webinar chat box. My colleagues that are with me today will be tracking all of those questions, and then we'll try to answer them roughly in the order that we receive them at the end of the presentation. Please only use one audio option. Using both your telephone and computer option simultaneously can lead to some poor quality. So we recommend for your best viewing and listening experience that you only use one audio option. We will be recording the webinar for future reference, sending it out to all registered participants, and then posting it to our eLab YouTube channel. We will have a period for questions at the end, but you can also feel free to ask questions throughout as they come to you and you feel inspired. And then if you do have any technical difficulties during the webinar, please go ahead and notify my colleague Margaret, who's with us here, and will be helping you if you have any issues or any difficulties connecting to the webinar. So I'd like to take a moment to introduce our eLab Accelerator 2017 team. Right now, we have sort of 4 core team members. We have Ms. Lena Hansen, who's not able to join us for this webinar, myself, Leah Guccione, who's the eLab Program Manager, and then I'm also joined by my colleagues Courtney and Margaret McCall, who are our project managers and assistant project manager for eLab Accelerator 2017. Do you ladies want to say a quick hello?
Hi everyone, this is Courtney.
And this is Margaret.
Great. So our objectives for today's webinar are to provide everyone with a brief overview on what is RMI's Electricity Innovation Lab, what we call eLab, and what is eLab Accelerator, to share with you some specifics around eLab Accelerator 2017, to give everyone a sense of what does Accelerator actually provide to the projects that attend, what do Accelerator projects look like, and what types of projects are we looking for in 2017, and then what are things that make a particularly strong Accelerator project. We have an application-based selection process, and we'll go through some of the things that make certain applications stronger than other applications for Accelerator. We also will take some time to highlight example projects from past years, and then we'll provide some comments and insights on our application process, and then, as I mentioned, we'll have some time for questions at the end for any questions that or concerns you may have. So with that, I think it's important to share with you a little bit of background on eLab and what RMI is doing with our innovation lab, because that'll, I think, provide helpful context for what we do and try to offer through our Accelerator event. So eLab is a one-of-a-kind, deliberately different, ongoing collaboration of leaders from across the electricity industry who have really made a commitment to their organizations, but also to one another, to try and work together in a fundamentally different way, to try and find solutions that address regulatory barriers, economic business barriers, technical, social, and other challenges that are affecting the transformation of the U.S. electricity system to something that is altogether more renewable, more resilient, more efficient, smarter and more capable, yet still affordable and reasonable to operate. And so these folks have made a commitment to work together in unique and different ways to try and come up with new solutions to those problems. And the Electricity Innovation Lab actually features a variety of different activities to support that collaboration with industry leaders. So with that, I think it's helpful to think about how eLab works. So at the foundation, we have this incredible network of people and resources who are bringing their unique perspectives and problems and questions and ideas from their own organizations and the geographies from which they hail. And then we, through everything we do with eLab, bring RMI with our partners Rios, bring to that this unique process support and collaboration tools that really helps animate that collaboration from those people and really leveraging all of the resources and ideas they have. And so that's really a foundational part of what we're doing in the Innovation Lab. But what we recognize is that if we're trying to drive change in the industry, that we have to understand the process by which the industry changes. And so with the network, we try to recognize what are sort of the key barriers and ideas around how you can address those barriers, and then work with our partners to actually then put real research and analysis and thought behind some of those new ideas, such that people then have sufficient confidence around them to actually test them wherever they may be. And so that's important because that's how we see ideas moving from on paper to actual examples in the ground that people can point to. And from those examples, we think it's important to help first movers and fast followers scale their successes to broader stakeholders in the industry. And then from all of that, there is learning that happens that we are trying to bring back into the lab. And so that's part of what eLab is trying to achieve in the many different events and programs and activities we support. And our eLab Accelerator event is actually part of this scaling component of what we're doing, where by bringing teams together, we're able to connect them with the best expertise and people who have actual experience that they can benefit from, so that we can help them move their projects forward further and faster. And with that, I'd like to turn things over to my colleague Courtney, who will tell you a little bit about eLab Accelerator specifically.
Hi again, this is Courtney Fairbrother. As Leah mentioned before, I'm the project manager for Accelerator in 2017. And so I'm going to give you just a brief overview of what exactly Accelerator is and the value proposition of attending Accelerator. So first, what is Accelerator? We describe Accelerator as an invitation-only 4-day working meeting to accelerate the impact of projects from teams working on innovative projects at the electricity systems distribution edge. So with that in mind, our meeting has some overall objectives, one being to actually help these projects and high potential teams accelerate their work going forward and move them to the next level during the course of the 3.5 days, but also after the event as well. Another component of the Accelerator event is that we are really trying to share eLab insights and approaches to different things. As Leah mentioned, our network, this is one event in our kind of overall eLab network, and so we use this as a way to help connect teams to kind of the best thinking and resources out there. And then the final objective of Accelerator is to allow teams to learn from a broader peer group working on related projects. So one thing we work very hard to do is to make sure that we recruit teams that are working on similar content areas, so there's a lot of cross-learning between the different project teams. So Accelerator provides a number of different things. The first is that over the course of this working session, we have a very structured agenda and process with how we actually move these projects forward that's very intentional. We will get into that a little bit more later. Another component is that it's a very rich learning experience, and we feature a number of experts across different sectors of the industry that help provide kind of the latest thinking and the best resources on different utility business models, distributed resources, as well as other topics in the electricity sector. Another big component is that we have a number of different tools and trainings that we use throughout the course of this structured agenda. As Leah mentioned, we partner with Rios Partners, who are kind of world-class experts in this idea of facilitation, and they work with us to help design these tools and this training to really move these projects forward. Another component is that through this work, both within the actual project teams themselves as well as amongst the different projects, we find that a lot of new alliances form to help support kind of a broader network of these teams who are working on similar projects. And the last, which we'll again get into a little bit more later, is Accelerator is a very unique environment, and we purposely structure things in a certain way that really allows teams to be creative and have some breakthrough ideas at the event. So a little bit into the methodology of Accelerator, and as you see at the bottom, and we will be providing these slides after the webinar as well, you can learn a little bit more about our methodology with eLab at the link below. But I'll just give you a high-level overview of the way we apply the social change lab model to Accelerator. So as the diagram on the right shows, we consider complex projects or complex problems to normally have three different components: social complexity, dynamic complexity, and generative complexity. During the course of Accelerator and with a lot of our eLab work in general, we take a very purposeful and strategic approach to make sure that we're addressing each element of these different types of complexity. So there's parts of the agenda that are very participative. There are parts of the agenda that are also very systemic, and we also make sure to take a very creative and experimental approach to really help overcome all of these different types of complexity. So the methodology of Accelerator is also there because we want to try to maximize opportunities for meaningful project work and individual learning. So we do this through several modes of working together. The project teams are facilitated, and they work through different sessions that target the project's biggest needs. So they can be a number of different content areas. We also, as I was mentioning before, try to facilitate a lot of cross-team learning, and then topic training with faculty members, which we'll get into more in a bit. And at the end, really this development of an action plan where appropriate to help these teams after Accelerator continue to do transformative work. So here's just a quick high-level example agenda from Accelerators in years past. So during the first day, it's a half day, and we use this day to really make sure everybody is up to speed on the Accelerator approach and why we think it's useful. Then as we transition into the second day, we work to help teams build this kind of shared foundation for where their project is that will help support forward momentum. So getting a really good understanding of what does this project actually look like today, and then identifying key questions that the project team has on the team today as well as going forward. And then throughout the course of the day, we also try to identify potential leverage points to help spur the project work forward faster. Then on day 3, we spend some time identifying who are the missing voices and resources that are not in the room or not yet involved in the project that could help you further the work, and begin to develop a solution hypotheses for actually moving this project forward. Then we get some clarity around next steps, so we make sure that everybody knows what they're doing after they leave the event. And we use this iterative feedback process from other participants to help make sure that we're sharing learning and to improve the approach that your project is actually taking. Then on our 4th day, we're really focused on making sure that the plan for moving the project forward is concrete and well developed. And then there's a piece at the end where each of the teams presents out and they can get requests and offers for support from other potential members in the audience. And then they also state their commitments and next steps for the project amongst everyone. So a key component that I mentioned before, at Accelerator we have a number of different faculty members. These include experts from across the electricity system that can help inform the work of the project teams. And we pick their expertise based on a number of different factors, such as what are the content areas that teams are looking at. But one of the important examples of their expertise are listed below. So some of our faculty members in the past have had regulatory expertise or designing portfolios of renewables. We've had experts in microgrid technology. And then you can see listed a number of the different faculty members from years past who have been actively involved in Accelerator. So the last thing I'll mention before transitioning over to my colleague is that one thing we really intentionally do at Accelerator is to create a retreat-like setting, which is why we pick Sundance. We want to take people out of their normal work mode and help them expand their thinking and be a little bit more in the creative, or a little bit more creative in the types of solutions to these problems. And so we purposely bring everybody out of a normal work setting and have it at this really awesome resort in Sundance. So with that, I'm going to transition over to my colleague Margaret, who's going to tell you a little bit more about Accelerator projects and project teams.
Great. Thanks, Courtney. As Courtney just said, I'm Margaret McCall. I'm the Deputy Project Manager for Accelerator 2017. And I'm going to take a few minutes to walk through some points on projects and project teams for Accelerator. So Accelerator is a project-focused event. There will be 12 teams at Accelerator 2017, each working on a project. 5 to 8 people compose a team. This represents multiple project stakeholders who together could successfully implement a project. Each project should have a clear champion or owner designated as the team champion. So team champions are our primary contact point before, during, and after Accelerator. Projects need to be actively under development, but can be at varying levels of maturity. And essentially, it's most important to have a clear future and objective to your project. And successful teams really bring together just the right combination of vision, experience, commitment, and knowledge to a project that can accelerate change. So projects are theme-focused. As I just discussed, in general, acceptable projects have a number of attributes, but broadly speaking, they're innovative, they have the potential to transform the electricity system, and they're focused on distributed renewables. But more specifically, projects must fall within 3 project themes. So new business models, DER value creation, and microgrids and more. So new business models as a theme covers projects that explore new market structures, utility business models, and regulatory efforts to optimize the value of distributed energy resources. So an example of this is the Minnesota E21 initiative that you'll hear more about shortly. The next possible theme is DER value creation. So these projects would tackle new rate designs, new compensation mechanisms or deployment strategies, and customer engagement programs that are focused on creating value streams for DERs. And the final theme is microgrids and more. So these are projects that deal with local DER solutions, such as microgrids, or also options like downtown clean energy zones, net zero districts, community solar projects, and other related ideas. And you'll hear more about that in a couple of minutes from projects in Ottawa and Hoboken. So each team at Accelerator has a dedicated RMI facilitator, and this is one of the core aspects of the event. The facilitator helps develop the project and the project team for Accelerator after the team has been selected. The the facilitator works with the team champion to prepare the team for Accelerator, guide the work of the team at Accelerator, and support the project after the event as well. So I'm going to quickly walk through the project selection criteria, which speaks to how we evaluate applications and what we look at in particular. So all teams won't necessarily meet all of these criteria, but should meet most of the following. So the project selection criteria fall into 5 broad categories. So the status of the project statement, the project impact, the stakeholder team, and the team champion. So first, the project status. The project should be an active project with significant or supportive initial project activity and a clear project future. There should be action and direction. The project statement is the next set of selection criteria. So it should convey a clear sense of objective, both a clear understanding of the project objective and a clear understanding of the need from Accelerator and the product that would come out of it. The third set of selection criteria deals with project impact. So this is essentially getting at the idea that, if this project is successful, could it be scaled? Could it be replicated? Is it a good platform to lead change? Does it have a good story? And of course, is it going to have direct impact? The stakeholder team is another important set of selection criteria. So as a team, the project team should be diverse, they should have the ability to affect change, and key stakeholders should be in attendance to actually be able to move the project forward. And then finally, the team champion is another key criterion. So the team champion needs to have driven ownership of the project and enthusiasm for the project, and the ability to sustain efforts both during and after Accelerator. And now I'll hand it back over to my colleagues to talk through some of the past Accelerator project examples that I was alluding to.
So the first project that we are going to hear from is one that Leah facilitated in 2015.
Great, thanks, Courtney. So in 2015, I worked with a team from Hoboken, New Jersey that came to Accelerator to look at how they could design microgrids for critical facilities in specifically the city of Hoboken, but also in the state of New Jersey more broadly. And one of the things that was in the scope of their considerations was how they would actually need to design these projects, how they would finance them, and what different types of ownership models they might need to consider in order to actually deploy and implement these microgrids. The situation behind which this team came to Accelerator was that during Hurricane Sandy, over 75% of Hoboken was affected and flooded, leaving many of their residents stranded in their dwellings without power and other utilities for as long as 2 to 3 weeks. This impacted thousands of their residents, and recognizing that Hoboken is in a flood zone that is likely to be impacted again, it really has driven the city to think about how can they be more resilient in the face of future severe weather events, and how can they implement what they call a shelter-in-place capability, where residents don't necessarily have to evacuate their dwelling or don't necessarily have to evacuate the city. They can take shelter in a reasonable place in the immediate vicinity of Hoboken. And so they had done some initial work to identify their critical facilities before coming to Accelerator, but still had a lot of work to do to find out how they would actually do the more detailed design for these microgrids, how they would pay for them, and how they would need to get other key stakeholders like their local utility involved in building the microgrids. So what they did at Accelerator was they took some time to look at the likely barriers that would stand in the way of actually deploying these microgrids in Hoboken. And that was both barriers in total, but what were barriers for specific stakeholders. They also conceptualize specific roles that the utility could play in these projects, as well as roles for other stakeholders like the city, different consultants, the New Jersey Board of Public Utilities, and others. They took some time to think through what were ways that they could finance the microgrid, what were the possible revenue streams, and then given those, what different ownership models made sense in order to actually have a clear line of sight to build and then operate the microgrids. And then they thought through what are the current legal and regulatory challenges that might prevent them from actually building these facilities in Hoboken. So where the team is today, and sort of part of the impact that Accelerator had for them, is the team was able to devise a new business model that they believe would work for all of the relevant stakeholders in New Jersey and specifically the city of Hoboken. And they also thought through some different variations on that business model that allowed for different roles for the utility in particular. And since then, the city and PSE&G, their local utility, have been revising their memorandum of understanding under which they're working on this project specifically. The New Jersey Board of Public Utilities, inspired by the business model work that happened at Accelerator, put out a white paper talking about possible business models and the future of microgrids in New Jersey. The city is actually in the process of laying and building some of the key infrastructure that will be part of the future microgrids. And right now, the city and the utility are also moving into the next phase of detailed design for some of the specific microgrids. So it was a great experience working with them, and I think they found a lot of value out of the event. And they're still making really great progress as a consequence today.
So up next, this is Courtney again. I'm going to speak to a team that I facilitated at Accelerator in 2016 that was based out of Ottawa in Canada. It's called Zibi. We had called them Zibi, Ottawa's Zero Carbon Community. So the objective of the Zibi project was to think about developing a business model for a potential district utility in the new Zibi community. The Zibi community is in Canada's capital city, Ottawa, and they have goals to be the most sustainable and eco-friendly community in the world. So some of the different aspects that we were really thinking about in this business model discussion was asset ownership, potential rate structures that they could have, as well as an investment strategy and operations plan for the district utility for this new community. So Zibi is a site that is going to be developed on a brownfield area in Ottawa, and they have some pretty ambitious goals under the One Planet Action Plan, which really focuses on zero carbon and zero waste development. So the local energy system at Zibi will deviate from the traditional utility role in a bit, where they're really focused on sustainability, digitally enabled consumer choice, and local energy provision and consumption. So this potential new district utility would have some very ambitious goals to achieve. And the project was looking at the local municipally owned utility, Hydro Ottawa, and then an innovation design center there, MARS, as well as a developer who all had some key stakes in developing this community to reach these goals. So at Accelerator, the team concentrated on a number of different things, and one of kind of the core things that came out of it was really a common understanding of what the core values of this new district utility would be. This sounds like a minor thing, but it actually helped propel their work forward a lot, because once they understood what the overall objective of this district utility was and what those values were that they wanted to achieve, it allowed the group to really think through how best to allow the utility to achieve that. The next component was actually going ahead and creating a straw man for this new district utilities business model. So who would be the potential owners of the district utility? How would they make money? How would they think about asset operations? All of that. And then the next two were really focused on what they could do going forward. So we determined key milestones and a path forward so that they could actually start to create this district utility as they built up the new community. And then they brainstormed barriers to the creation of this district utility. So what kind of legal constraints or regulatory constraints might there be that would prevent them from doing the types of things we were talking about at the event. So since Accelerator, it's only been a few months, but the group went home and immediately presented the business model for the straw man and business model for the new utility, as well as the action plans to the respective boards of the different organizations that were involved. And they're currently in the process of negotiating an agreement for the actual creation of the new district utility, and hope to have that done by the end of the year. And then separately from the actual utility itself, they continued the path towards construction of the new district. Since this would be an entirely new community development, there's a lot of construction that's going on outside of just the electricity system. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to another one of my colleagues, Dan Crosscall, who facilitated our Minnesota E21 initiative in 2016.
Great, thank you, Courtney. So yeah, great to have this chance to share a little bit about this project in addition to the last two that you heard. Minnesota E21 has the distinct status of having attended all three of our Accelerator events to date. So we're very pleased with the relationship that RMI and eLab has built with E21 over the last 3 years, and in particular, really the endorsement that they've given to the Accelerator program with their return visits. As Margaret mentioned, E21 really sits in this space of utility business models among the project types that we invite to Accelerator. And it is an initiative that is now about 3 years old in Minnesota. It's convened by the Great Plains Institute as well as the Minnesota Center for Energy and Environment, and works as a consensus-based multi-stakeholder effort to really identify and align on the ways that the utilities in the state of Minnesota will need to evolve to address the sustainability and business model challenges that utilities are facing across the country. It's really a forward-looking initiative where in other parts of the country, if utility folks on the line are familiar with projects in California or the situation in Hawaii or New York, similarly, Minnesota is thinking about how to evolve their utility business models that have the unique aspect of being in a vertically integrated state and in the middle part of the country with some distinct attributes of the system that actually reflects the circumstances of many other parts of the country as well. They have attended Accelerator for these 3 years, right at the launch of E21 as to kind of come together with the leadership of E21 and key participants to think about what this process should look like. In year 2, they returned to review the progress of that first year and to think about what this second phase would look like, and really trying to get down to the specifics of what kind of research and projects they could do to help advance this conversation in Minnesota. And then in the last year, in 2016, when I had the pleasure of facilitating the group, the focus was really around evolving the structure of E21, as it says here, to shorten that distance from recommendations to implementation. And I can say a little bit more about that on the next slide. But really, it comes out of an identified need to make E21 generative and responsive to policymakers' needs in the state. So we had the great opportunity to sit not only with the leadership of E21, but with 2 commissioners from the Minnesota Public Utility Commission and representatives from the Minnesota Department of Commerce that are 2 key stakeholders in that environment to understand what their needs are and how E21 can directly support those. Really a rare opportunity to work with policymakers in an intimate and focused environment over the course of the 4 days of Accelerator and have that discussion. So at the meeting this year, we did those things. We had the opportunity to sit and review the progress of E21 in its first 2 years, identify what the successes have been, as well as what perhaps some of the challenges have been and where there are opportunities for improvement. We deepened our understanding collectively of what are those needs of the Minnesota commissioners and other policymakers and how E21 can best support those, really in some deep focused discussions that frankly just were not able to happen in kind of the day-to-day course of business in Minnesota or through other E21 meetings that they have at home. And then most importantly, the focus of the event this year was to develop a revised structure for the organization to increase that value proposition of E21 to state policymakers as well as to other participants in the system. And then finally, we identified a set of critical issues that E21 might want to focus on going forward with its work under that new structure. So what you see here is a bit of the outcome, kind of an overview of that outcome of the new structure that that our discussion was able to arrive at. And while perhaps it looks relatively straightforward and simple, it really is the outgrowth of that focused time over 2.5, 3 days, really pressure testing exactly how this could look in practice and what the key leverage points and opportunities were for E21 to do work that is directly applicable and decision-oriented by a whole set of policymakers and decision makers in Minnesota, from the PUC to the legislature as well as the utilities. So what we did arrive at is this structure in which E21 will newly form in the coming months to have an advisory committee of both in-state and out-of-state experts to inform and bring that expertise into the work through a process to further identify critical issues that need attention, and then most importantly, to identify a subset of those that can turn into focused innovation projects on which a group of participants can work on to do work that is directly oriented to the decisions that must be made to advance the Minnesota electricity system towards E21's goals and the collective goals of that community. I'll also just note here that in the month since, E21 has completed its phase 2 white papers. So that was work that was undertaken before. In fact, they got together with us this year at Sundance, but those are to be released, I believe, just in the next few weeks, an important milestone for that group. And they're now in the process of launching this new structure, and we'll have a short list of critical issues that will turn into innovation projects to undertake in the next 12 months.
So with that, we're going to turn it back over to Margaret for a second, and she's going to walk us through the project application and recruitment processes.
Thanks, Brittany. So I'll quickly run through the project application recruitment processes, and then we'll have time to take some questions. So the timeline to Accelerator has already begun. Recruitment began on October 3rd, so we've been underway for about a month now. And the key date to keep in mind is January 13th is when applications are due. A couple of important notes under the application deadline. So first, applications are due on January 13th, but they're reviewed on a rolling basis. But more importantly, we highly encourage sending in a draft application as soon as you have it. The RMI team is happy to provide feedback and essentially provide whatever support we can to help you create the best application possible. So this can be an iterative process with the ultimate deadline, again, being January 13th. In mid-February, final invitations are sent to teams, and teams accepting the invitation commit to actively engaging before, during, and after the event, so in the intervening couple of months before the actual event on April 18th. So to talk through the Accelerator participant fee and scholarships briefly, the participant fee for Accelerator is $1,700 per person, which includes 3 nights lodging and meals at Sundance Mountain Resort, ground transportation to and from the Salt Lake City Airport, all event activities. Teams are encouraged to seek financial support from project sponsors or from other sources, but a limited number of scholarships are available to offset the cost of participation to individuals who might not otherwise be able to attend. And finally, to get down to the nuts and bolts of the application itself, it is a relatively brief application with the following set of question categories, which basically fall into project questions, team questions, and status and objective questions. So the application asks you to list your project title, project type, and project description. It asks for your proposed multi-stakeholder team, which can be titles if specific people don't exist yet as part of the team, as well as additional stakeholders or expertise that would be helpful in pushing the project forward, and the project champions. And then finally, progress to date, project barriers, and additional resources for consideration. As I said before, RMI staff are here to work with you to help you submit the best application possible, so please don't hesitate to reach out as soon as you're ready. And the application can be found at the link below.
Well, thank you very much, Margaret. With that, we will open it up for any questions, and it looks like a number of them have already come in. The first one is, how does one think about identifying or recruiting a team that is actually multi-stakeholder, and what exactly does multi-stakeholder mean? So in the way we use multi-stakeholder, we're talking about different organizations that have either a key interest in the project, are needed to help move the project forward, or can help provide and shed some light onto other components of the project that wouldn't have been thought of if they weren't in the room. And examples of that in the past include a team might bring their utility, they might bring a large customer off-taker from the grid, municipal governments, state governments, as well as a number of other kind of entities. And how you go about actually identifying and recruiting a team that is multi-stakeholder is honestly different for every project. In many cases, these are ongoing projects that already exist, and that kind of multi-stakeholder team is already built into the way the project is. In other instances in the past, a particular person has a really great idea for a project, and they know certain key organizations that they would like to be involved in the project, and then we can work with the team as well to help them identify who might those other people be that you're kind of missing right now. So do you need a large customer in the room? Should you really be thinking about the DER provider's perspective, et cetera? So the next question we have is, where can I find more information about the past teams? So our Accelerator website, which is at the bottom of this page, has a page that's dedicated directly to teams. And we have links that link to every single team from 2014, 2015, and 2016. And they tell a bit about what the project objective was, who was involved in the project, and what were they trying to achieve at Accelerator, and what were their actual outcomes from the event. And if you have more specific questions on past project teams, feel free to reach out to me or Margaret, and we can help answer those questions as well. The next one is it possible to get help with my application before I submit? As Margaret mentioned, we are ready and willing to help with any aspect of your application. We often have conversations with different teams about helping them actually to develop what the project would be. So what is your project objective? What would you want to achieve at Accelerator, and having conversations around that. We will also go and review applications as they come in and provide comment to different groups. And then, as I also mentioned, we can help recruit the right people to be involved in your project. So if you're missing a certain type of entity, we can help figure out what that is, and if there are other people in the space that could help to see that. The next question is, what kind of support is available to Accelerator projects or teams after the event? So in terms of Accelerator support specifically, we offer a handful of consulting hours after the fact, and that normally looks like either helping teams review a proposal that came out of it, or a deliverable that came out of the event, and getting on phone calls with them to understand where the project is and provide some key insight. We also work with teams in a number of different ways outside of Accelerator, but sometimes these projects can turn into a larger engagement afterwards, but that's normally on a case-by-case basis and not something that we offer with each team. So the next question is, who are the faculty and what do they do? The faculty members were listed a couple of slides back, and they are also presented on our website. Right now, we are actively recruiting and engaging our faculty members, and so the ones that are listed on our website are from 2016, but we hope to have the ones for 2017 up shortly. Faculty members do a number of different things. One, they engage with the different teams on specific content areas. So an example of past years is we've had a number of microgrid related projects come in, and we have a particular faculty member who's been there in years past that has a lot of expertise on the technical integration of different components of a microgrid, as well as different barriers that teams might see when actually creating a microgrid. So he will drop in kind of at different opportunities throughout the course of the event and be there to provide questions, to provide insights, to help the teams realize things that they might have not even been thinking about, that kind of work. So the next question is, beyond the categories of projects you're looking for, are there particular projects that you'd like to see that are truly cutting edge? To be honest, this varies year over year, and we are sometimes surprised at the exact proposals that come in, and we purposely leave the categories as pretty open-ended and broad so that we can have that kind of room for growth and for things that we maybe didn't even think of as cutting edge, or that we didn't necessarily know were going on. In years past, we've looked at teams who are integrating EVs into the system and thinking about how to use them as a resource. We've looked at different components of energy efficiency, so what is needed to really take the next step on a number of energy efficiency projects. We've had teams that are concentrated on building microgrids or community district energy systems. We've had a number of different projects, and we'd be open to a number of different types of projects as well. So then our next question is, do public utility commissions or regulators participate in Accelerator teams, and any tips for engaging them? In years past, we've had a number of public commission staff, as well as the regulators themselves, actually attend Accelerator. The E21 project that Dan was speaking to earlier had several regulators last year in attendance. And it really just depends on what the content area is and if they're a necessary participant to be there at the event. One tip is that traditionally we have found that it is often hard for regulators to get this type of travel funded. So a lot of sometimes our scholarships end up going to help fund regulators or commission staff to actually be in attendance at Accelerator. And our next question is, does RMI sometimes take a role in creating teams of the minimum 5 people for proposals which have fewer identified now? If I'm understanding this correctly, I believe we will help with that on occasion. We will help, as I was mentioning before, actually to identify who those right people might be and to kind of get them up to speed on what the project is and get them engaged in the project. So we do that kind of on an as-needed basis. I think that looks like it's all of our questions. So unless there are any other ones, we are going to wrap up. And we thank you all for attending. And please feel free, again, to reach out to myself or my colleague, Margaret, with any questions. And we will be putting the slides up on our website and hopefully also a recording of this webinar as well. Thank you again, and we hope to see some applications come through our website from you guys. Thanks.